Today's focus is a question. Will China's Drednaught 2 result in production hell 2 for Tesla? We also take a look at battery management and tips from owners regarding better ownership experience. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also wanted to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. Makes a huge difference. We'd appreciate it if you would take time to subscribe if you enjoyed our show. Please note, I have a dead cat and mouse here. It looks like a tribble. It is not a tribble, but it definitely is helpful in reducing wind noise impact on sound quality. So today, I actually tried to get a little bit of a view of the basilica behind us, and we'll show you more video at the end. If it's good enough for the Pope, I think it's good enough for us. So one of the issues that's popping up in China is the fact that as Elon was getting ready to recruit employees this spring, he made a comment which was, who wants to join the Drednaught factory? And so as soon as I saw this, I was like, wow, this sounds like a good idea. As you all know, what the Drednaught is about is the fact that Elon has a theory about factories in which the goal is to have a factory that is primarily machine focused, where you can in fact produce cars at a pace fast enough that you can be running alongside the car as it's being produced. So in theory, this concept has a number of advantages. Number one, speed. You're not limited by human beings and the pace that they can move at. You have the speed at which machines can move. Number two, because you don't have as many human beings involved, you have the potential to lower the overall cost, because in theory, in most entities, 60% of your cost is the human power of that entity. And then three, obviously, part of the cost is you can go 24 hours a day without breaks if you choose to. Machines don't require the type of management that people do. So the concept of a machine-only Drednaught factory has been and continues to be appealing for many entities, because it sets up for a lot of beautiful elements of how things might go. So in the case of Drednaught 1, one of the problems we obviously ran into is that Elon's conclusion on Drednaught 1 was that human beings were overrated in terms of their potential impact on successful manufacturing. Basically, Drednaught 1 had a handicap, which was not only were you trying to produce a vehicle that was technologically advanced, you also had the problem of Tesla had to operate its Drednaught factory in a vertical direction on 3 tiers rather than in a flat, long line. And this introduced issues regarding how do you get supplies to the line, a large number of conveyor belts, all of which ended up adding to the 1.0 version of, nightmare production. As Elon stated, the solution that they came up with was the fact that there are a lot of designs that you can have on a computer or on a blackboard, but once it gets out into the workplace, you have to determine whether or not this is a viable option. And the answer that came up was that basically the beautiful plans did not work out, and there are a large number, perhaps $20 or $30 million worth of equipment and design that had to be ripped out and replaced by human beings, particularly when it came to materials management. And that is sort of getting, if you have different lines along the production line, how do you get materials to that line? And the answer was a conveyor belt system, which didn't work. So they kind of ripped that out and went back to having human beings driving forklifts of different types to bring materials to those lines. So this was sort of the sort of death or fate of the initial Drednaught factory. And the question is kind of where do we go as we head into China? And what impact does that have on production? So the answer that we're sort of hoping for, I think, is going to occur is that China's factory was being built from scratch with the Drednaught plan in mind. So the early answer is that given the experience of Drednaught 1, it is now better known what will and will not work in a Drednaught situation as you build out this factory. There's still some sort of interesting unknowns that are lurking, and the biggest one that I think is going to be interesting to watch in the China situation is that, you know, each of these sort of robotic situations is about a $600,000 robot when you add in programming and cost of the device. The next question, though, is it better to pay $600,000 for a robot or pay $30,000 or $40,000 to a human being to do the same job? And at this point, given that the Chinese government pretty much put up all the money for the factory, Tesla was free to spend as much as they wanted to continue to, if you will, ride the Drednaught train. So what this resulted in then is the fact that we're in a situation where the Tesla is definitely free to experiment, and the experimentation is actually enhanced in its potential volume by the fact that the stated expectation for early production of a 500,000 car a year facility is to only do about 3,000 cars a month-ish. So we were kind of surprised by both the when the expected production will start and the volume that they're expecting from that production facility, because after you spend $2.5 billion, only getting 3,000 cars a month out of it, in our minds, seemed ludicrously low. And so it's our estimate that this production facility will produce something in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 vehicles a week, lurking at 20,000 vehicles a month, or in year one, a run rate of approximately 200,000 vehicles. And so with those numbers in mind, what we're also fascinated by is the fact that if in fact the Drednaught factory doesn't work, the rate of hand put together of the Model 3 at the current production facilities is actually something in the range of 3,000 cars a month. So the numbers being articulated by the China facility is in essence, a worst case scenario of the Drednaught working, and then all of a sudden we go to a hand build, and the hand build situation allows us to move into, if you will, a better situation, a minimal production situation at the 3,000 that we've talked about. So, the early answer here is that the Drednaught should work better to facilitate higher speed production. But even if it doesn't work, and even if there have to be further adjustments to address inefficiencies that pop up that were unexpected, that it's not a huge worry, because the early expectations for productions were low enough that it's not a big deal. Now, this brings us into an interesting question mark about the whole Drednaught concept. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but one of the things that's been studied in the auto industry over the last 30 years is the fact that you can take a car, and because of how stamping equipment works now, if you look at a car, in theory, everything except for the doors could be stamped out in one piece. And it's beautiful because this process actually allows you to build more cars faster. The nightmare that pops up with this solution is, what if somebody hits the front quarter panel of your car? What then happens to the entire body of the car based on damage that might happen only on the front quarter? Do you end up having to take the entire body of the car off and put a new one on? And so hence you've noticed over the last 20 years that yes, stamping equipment has been able to bang out parts, but there's been kind of a restriction on how much of this is being allowed by a piece of stamping equipment to avoid just the problem I just described. So Elon Musk, as you'll notice, has pointed out that for the Model Y, the goal is to leverage that stamping equipment to in fact execute what I just described. And so it introduces the fact that we're going to find out if this is a really, really good idea or it's a bad idea. There's no doubt it's a good idea from a cost standpoint when you're producing, because having one stamp out is way better than producing each of those panels separately. From a cost standpoint, it's just a question of what happens after you do that from an ownership standpoint down the road. So one of the interesting sort of elements that's popped up is that there's a piece of information that came out that you probably all saw. And what it is that in Germany, there's a rental car company that ordered 100 Model 3s. And then as those Model 3s were arriving, they took delivery on the first 20. They determined that I believe there's about a 25% defect rate in terms of the number of vehicles that were damaged or needed some kind of repair. And then Tesla went into a process of kind of not wanting to take a responsibility or being very slow to respond. So because there was fear that unknown quality would arrive and then there would be difficulties in getting Tesla to take their cars back, the buyer, the rental car company in Germany, elected to cancel the entire 100 car order. And this brings up kind of an interest. So that solution or that situation illustrates the point that right now Tesla is still in an interesting mode as a company. There's a business axiom that says that you can optimize on speed, quality, or price, but you can't optimize on all three. And so in this case, what we're having is that Tesla really has a need for speed when it comes to production, but it's not real clear that the quality coming out of the plant is consistently at a high level. And it's our belief that the problem that's actually popped up is the fact that the vehicles coming out of the tent that are being hand constructed are being put together, but there have been a number of defects that are sort of built into the cars by the builders of the car that they know are there, but in order not to slow down the production line, they've continued to produce at as high a rate of speed as possible. So one of the areas in particular that's become a particular problem is temperature. In the main factory, you have air conditioning that controls temperature, but in the tents where they're putting the cars together, the temperature range is going anywhere from near freezing in the 30s all the way up to the early 100s, especially now that we're in late August in California. So one of the issues is that when you're dealing with an aluminum exterior for the vehicle and you're dealing with paint onto that aluminum, it can be a very delicate process. And the net result is one of the biggest issues that's popping up is paint defects for the finished cars that are coming off. So slightly a sidebar note on this is that I actually asked our Tesla rep about delivery. There's actually a $1,200 destination charge that comes with a Tesla vehicle, whether you pick it up at the factory or not. One of the roaming questions I have is half of our viewers are California based. And even if you got to pay the destination charge, I think it's way smarter to go to the factory, or there's actually a delivery center that's very close to the factory. They no longer actually do straight deliveries. You can tour the factory, but go to the delivery center to actually pick up your car. And I highly recommend, particularly if you have a performance or very select model in terms of the number of vehicles produced, that you actually pick it up at the factory, because it gives you an opportunity to actually go thoroughly through the vehicle. And if there are any issues, you have a faster turnaround in terms of quick repair, so you can get your vehicle in a nice condition rather than having it shipped out to a remote location, and now you have the problem of the fact that your local facility doesn't have the repair parts, etc., and it ends up with a long cycle time before you actually get a vehicle that you're satisfied with. So, you know, and then for those of you who are longer distance out, hey, fly out and you know, get a chance to look at your vehicle before it arrives. A little trick that the auto industry I was taught maybe 15 years ago is whenever you see a car, photos of a car, you'll notice that the process is they actually go around the car in circles all the way until they're on top of the car taking pictures. And by doing so, you get an opportunity to sort of see images of the car from every angle possible. So as you get your car on delivery, even if it's after delivery, take some time to take those photos, because it allows you to document, you know, before there's a large amount of time, if there are any major issues that one should deal with. So our assessment of the whole thing when it comes to Drednaught 3 is, you know, what is going to happen relative to the Chinese factory? The answer is, I think there'll be bugs still in the Drednaught 3 process. I also think that it kind of doesn't make sense to follow through with it, because the cost of labor has dropped so much that it does not need to be a focus anymore. But the third reason why I think Drednaught should be rolled back is Toyota, as we've discussed previously, is number one in the world when it comes to quality of vehicles. And they've made an aggressive effort to limit the amount of robots to 25% of a vehicle's build. And so what this introduces is the fact that Drednaught is an excellent idea because of the elements we talked about. But what Toyota has found is that having human beings be part of the build is a great way to improve quality of execution for those vehicles. So we wanted to bring this up again because we definitely want Tesla to not lose business because of the number of defects that are getting into customers' hands. And our hope is that if Drednaught does what it did in round one, the cost of labor being so low in China will allow Tesla to move towards slowing down production lines in other places and head towards a higher quality finished product, which reduces overall costs. You know, and one of the last things that this kind of brings up as a interesting challenge or point is a concept called cost of goods sold. So it really feels good when you ship all those vehicles out on a very rapid basis and you can claim a certain revenue number, but there's a certain amount of cash allocated, I think it's $2,000 per car, to repair any kind of defects that the vehicles may have. And so based on early numbers and word of mouth, there seems to be a large number of repairs going on after the fact, and that stuff is expensive, but it gets hidden in the balance sheet in certain ways. What's also expensive is the fact that as you have customers that are publicized heavily, like the one in Germany with 100 cars, or other customers who are telling their neighbors about defects that they've had, you're incrementally losing those customers that it was hard to find to begin with. So I really think that the emphasis on Drednaught rather than the emphasis on quality and allowing Drednaught to chase after you solve quality is a reflection of somebody who loves technology, which Elon Musk does and all of us love. But the issue, though, is that if that technology isn't producing a finished product that customers want to own and own for a long period of time, I think it's a very, very critical issue. Now, you know, I'm going to take a little break here and point out that all of you that said hello, appreciate your doing so. We're really emphasizing making a point of not saying hello during our show because it allows us to focus on the topic at hand and get it on out there and not have it as interruptions for other viewers. So in this case, I just wanted to, you know, note that China is about to come online. The Drednaught concept is being brought more strong into this. And there's a whole question mark of how the battery piece of this is going to work out. The battery production is matching the volume of cars being produced right now. And from what we can tell, this is a 7,000 to 10,000 a week car production. And the question of where the battery is going to come from China, and are those batteries going to be working well as they do their thing, Those are questions that are in the unknown zone right now, but we're supposed to have answers to that, including Chinese manufacturers. One of the other questions that pops up is that Maxwell is supposed to introduce innovations that's going to affect the battery process that Tesla is involved with. And another question that's lurking out there is, as you deliver those new innovations from Maxwell into the battery solutions, do you share those with CATL or LG or other manufacturers to get the cars done? And now you have those innovations showing up in the batteries that are being built for competing firms, therefore threatening Tesla's sort of dominance in the space. There's one other discussion topic I'm actually looking forward to comments further on, and the discussion topic focuses on the fact that, you know, there's an interesting question mark out there, which is, yes, Tesla is going to be getting batteries from someplace else rather than just the ones from the gigafactory, and there's a gap that's closing between what Tesla does and what's being done by other manufacturers, especially given the number of former Tesla employees that are now out there and building. Now, we're in an interesting zone right now where there's a lot of folks that are jumping into this discussion on the side of, you know, Tesla's way ahead, will never be caught up to. And I think that the process that Tesla has come up with of trying to get as many models on the street as fast as possible is smart, and giving up profitability to do so, I also think is smart, because once you have yourself firmly established out there, you know, I think that it's a smarter way to go, even though you're not seeing a booming stock price immediately because of the costs related to the new products. So, you know, therefore, I just think the stock price is hampered in the process. There's an answer that's going to emerge over the next 2 or 3 weeks that I think is going to affect Tesla's stock price greatly, and that is, as the tariff wars happen with Trump and China in battle, is the conclusion we came to on the China free trade zone stuff going to really come to bear? Because if China allows the Model X, S, and 3, be it parts or a complete vehicle, to enter China in the free trade zone and not have the tariffs, I think it allows Tesla's position to get a lot stronger. I'm leaning towards saying that our conclusion on this is on point, because NIO just laid off 1,000 people. And as we all know, NIO was supposed to get the factory that Tesla is building in currently, but the Chinese government has really made a concerted effort to try to identify every method possible to increase the number of EV owners, and Tesla being brought in to manufacture is part of that process, so we look forward to it. You know, I wanted to note to you guys that we definitely work hard to sort of deliver a good show each time with information that's useful. We'd really appreciate your taking time out to like and subscribe. Any support on Patreon would be appreciated. We also look forward to your input to help us clarify for our viewers and ourselves some of the questions that might be lurking out there. So we look forward to your input in that regard as well. A little bit of a view of Catholic University here. We're in Washington, D.C. There's a huge 2 universities and a whole bunch of other facilities area that Catholic U is a part of. And you probably can't see it, but we have a basilica that's all the way right in the dead center of the picture there, where the Pope spoke last year. So it's kind of an interesting, so if the Pope is good enough for the Pope, it's good enough for us. So wanted to remind you, 25 leg lists for a leg. Don't eat within 4 hours of going to bed, at minimum 2 hours. Look forward to your comments that we can all share at the end of the show. We hope the Drednaught works better than last time and doesn't create another production hell, is the conclusion of our show. In German, we say tschüss. In French, we say au revoir. Hebrew, lehitrot. Farsi, choda hafez. Ni hao ma, Chinese. Enough respect. Wa good man for Dred and Brother Donovan. Again, wanted to thank all of you that said hello to us during our show. Look forward to your comments at the end. Have a great day. Bye for now.